It was just another bustling morning at JFK's Terminal 4 when a gate agent's smug laugh echoed over the intercom, mocking a passenger's thick Southern Creole accent. The agent thought she was humiliating a nobody, just a tired woman in a faded trench coat. She didn't know the woman holding the crumpled boarding pass was holding the fate of the entire airline in her hands. By the time the flight landed, one of them would be unemployed. Here is how arrogance met its ultimate match. The air inside John F. Kennedy International Airport early in the morning always carried a distinct metallic scent, a blend of cheap floor wax, stale roasted coffee, and the palpable anxiety of thousands of people realizing they were running late. At Gate B24, the atmosphere was particularly grim. The departure board flashed a glaring yellow, delayed. The weary passengers huddled around the charging stations were practically vibrating with frustration. Behind the podium stood Brittany Langford. Brittany, wearing her navy blue uniform like it was an evening gown, was fundamentally annoyed by the existence of passengers. To her, they were cattle, an inconvenience that stood between her and her flight benefits, which she used extensively to fund her aspiring travel influencer lifestyle. She tapped her acrylic nails against the laminate counter, scrolling through her phone, blatantly ignoring the line of people waiting to ask about the delay. The airline was by all industry metrics a sinking ship. Over recent years, the carrier had become a national punchline. Viral videos of luggage being hurled onto the tarmac, catastrophic delays, and gate agents screaming at paying customers had sent the stock price plummeting. The board of directors had fired the old CEO recently. The public didn't yet know who was taking over. The press release was scheduled to hit the wire soon, but the new CEO was already in the building. Elena Langford stood in line at Gate B24, quietly observing the chaos. In her 40s, Elena was a formidable presence, though you wouldn't necessarily know it from her current attire. She was dressed down deliberately, a comfortable pair of dark tailored jeans, a beige turtleneck sweater with no discernible designer logo, and an olive green trench coat. Her natural hair was pulled back into a simple, elegant low bun. Elena had built her career as a corporate fixer. Raised in the heart of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, she had clawed her way up from a regional logistics manager at a shipping firm to a Harvard MBA, eventually becoming the most feared and respected turnaround executive in the aviation sector. She was hired by the board with one mandate: clean house. Before she stepped into the glittering corner office, Elena wanted to see the rot for herself. No handlers, no PR team, no VIP escorts. Just a regular ticket purchased under her maiden name. Flying economy. She watched as Brittany finally looked up from her phone and barked at the elderly man at the front of the line. "Sir, I already told you the inbound aircraft had a mechanical issue. Staring at me isn't going to fix the plane." The old man flinched and shuffled away. Elena's jaw tightened. She stepped up to the podium, placing her mobile phone with her digital boarding pass on the scanner. It beeped red. "Excuse me, darling," Elena said. Her voice was warm, but it carried the distinct rich cadence of her Louisiana roots, a deep rhythmic drawl that she had fiercely refused to scrub from her speech despite decades in ruthless corporate boardrooms. "It looks like the app might have dropped my seat assignment when the flight got delayed. Could you be a dear and check my reservation?" Brittany blinked, looking Elena up and down. Her eyes lingered on the unbranded trench coat, the simple leather tote bag over her shoulder, and the dark skin of the woman speaking to her. Brittany's lips curled into a smirk. "I'm sorry, what?" Brittany said, leaning forward dramatically, cupping a hand behind her ear. "Are we speaking English because I didn't catch half of that?" Elena's eyes cooled, but her expression remained perfectly pleasant. "I said," she repeated, enunciating with deliberate razor-sharp clarity while maintaining her southern lilt. "My seat assignment seems to have disappeared from the app. I need you to pull up the reservation." Brittany let out a short, dismissive laugh. She glanced at her coworker, a young man who was desperately trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. "Did you hear that, Brad? Sounds like a character from a movie." Brittany turned back to Elena. "Look, honey, you're in basic economy, seat 38E. That's a middle seat in the back row next to the bathroom. It didn't disappear. You just don't know how to refresh your app." "Actually," Elena said, her voice dropping a fraction of an octave, "I booked a standard economy seat, not basic. And I hold platinum medallion status with your partner alliance. The system usually automatically clears me for an economy, plus upgrade." "Platinum status?" Brittany rolled her eyes, her voice raising loudly enough for the first few rows of waiting passengers to hear. "Right. Sure you do. Let me guess, you printed a fake card off the internet. Look, ma'am, just because you come up here talking loud and using your whatever that accent is, doesn't mean you get to hustle your way into a better seat. This is New York. We don't do that sweet tea and grits routine here." A heavy silence fell over the immediate vicinity. Several passengers looked up from their laptops, their expressions morphing from exhaustion to shock. Elena didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the young woman in front of her, cataloging the name tag. "Brittany L. My accent," Elena said softly, "has nothing to do with my reservation. I'd like you to type my confirmation number into your terminal. Please." Brittany's face flushed with irritation. She despised being told what to do, especially by someone she had already categorized as beneath her. She aggressively clacked the keys on her keyboard. "Fine. Name and confirmation. Langford. Record locator is Alpha Tango 947. Brittany typed it in. She stared at the screen. A small prompt flashed, indicating that this passenger was indeed a high-tier loyalty member and had been flagged for an operational upgrade to first class due to an oversold main cabin. Brittany's finger hovered over the mouse. She looked at Elena, at her calm, expectant face, at the quiet dignity that radiated from her posture. Brittany felt a petty, spiteful urge bubble up in her chest. She wasn't going to put this woman in first class, not after she had practically ordered her around. "Yeah, well," Brittany lied, clearing the prompt from the screen. "System says you're in 38E, and honestly, you're lucky you even have a seat. We're overbooked." "I see," Elena said calmly. She knew exactly what the system said. She had helped design the back-end architecture of the airline's reservation software as a consultant years earlier. She knew Brittany had just manually overridden a system-generated upgrade. "And my boarding zone? Zone 5, with the rest of the basic economy." Brittany then shifted her gaze to Elena's bag, a beautifully crafted, well-worn leather duffel. "And you're going to have to check that bag. It's too big." Elena glanced down at her duffel. "It's 21 inches. Your airline's maximum carry-on dimension is 22 inches. It fits. It looks oversized to me," Brittany snapped. "Put it in the sizer." At this point, a young man in a university hoodie sitting nearby stood up. "Hey," he said, stepping toward the podium. "Leave her alone. Her bag is smaller than the roller I just brought through. You're just giving her a hard time." Brittany shot the young man a venomous glare. "Sir, step back, or I will have airport security remove you from this flight for interfering with airline operations." The young man hesitated, looking at Elena apologetically. Elena gave him a subtle, reassuring nod, silently telling him to stand down. She didn't want collateral damage. "Put it in the sizer," Brittany demanded again, pointing to the metal cage beside the podium. Without a word, Elena picked up her heavy leather duffel and slid it into the metal frame. It dropped in perfectly, with over an inch of clearance on all sides. Brittany's jaw tightened. "It's too heavy, and frankly, your attitude is becoming a security concern. I can deny you boarding right now." Elena stood her ground. "You can certainly try, Brittany. But before you do, I suggest you call your manager. Let's make sure everything is handled strictly by the book." "Oh, you want a manager?" Brittany smirked. "Gladly." She picked up the landline phone and dialed a short extension. "Yeah, Todd, I need you at gate B24. I have a disruptive passenger." Within minutes, a red-faced, overworked man in a slightly wrinkled manager's uniform jogged over. Todd looked like a man who was counting the days until retirement. He didn't ask Elena what happened. He immediately turned to Brittany. "What's the issue? This passenger is refusing to comply with baggage policies and is becoming argumentative." Brittany lied smoothly, her tone suddenly adopting a sickly sweet, victimized pitch. "She's demanding a free first-class upgrade," and raising her voice. Todd finally looked at Elena. "Ma'am, you can't harass my staff. You either check the bag and take your assigned seat, or we refund your ticket and you find another airline." Elena looked from Todd to Brittany. She was taking mental notes. The lack of basic inquiry. The immediate hostile escalation. The blatant racial and regional microaggressions. It was worse than the data showed. The culture was entirely poisoned. "I haven't raised my voice once," Elena said smoothly, her Louisiana accent purring with a quiet, dangerous authority. "My bag fits the dimensions. Your agent manually deleted my system upgrade. I am simply asking for the service I paid for." Todd sighed, rubbing his temples. He clearly didn't care about the truth. He just wanted the line to move. "Brittany, just print her a baggage tag. Ma'am, the bag goes under the plane. Seat 38E. That's my final word." Brittany beamed triumphantly. She violently hammered her keyboard, printing out a white adhesive luggage tag. She slapped it onto the handle of Elena's leather bag. "Gate check," Brittany said over the PA system, deliberately keeping the microphone keyed so the entire terminal could hear her next words. "Just a reminder to all passengers, we do not tolerate abusive behavior from guests, regardless of where you're from or how loudly you demand special treatment. Boarding will commence in 5 minutes. A few people in the crowd murmured in disgust, not at Elena, but at Brittany. Elena unzipped the side pocket of her duffel, removed a slim laptop and a manila folder, and handed the bag over to the ramp agent standing nearby. She then took her new boarding pass from the counter. She leaned in just slightly, so only Brittany could hear her. "You've been incredibly helpful, Brittany," Elena whispered softly. "More than you could possibly know." Brittany rolled her eyes, turning her back to the new CEO. Next in line, boarding flight 408 was a miserable, chaotic affair. Because the flight was heavily delayed, the gate agents were trying to cram passengers onto the aircraft in record time to avoid a fine for tarmac delays. When Zone 5 was finally called, Elena joined the herd, shuffling down the jet bridge. The carpet on the jet bridge was stained and fraying. The fuselage of the aircraft looked like it hadn't been washed in months. Every detail registered in Elena's mind like a ticking meter. She stepped onto the plane. "Welcome aboard," muttered a flight attendant leaning against the galley bulkhead. The flight attendant, a young woman named Lena Hart, looked utterly defeated. She didn't look at Elena. She was staring blankly at the emergency exit door, mindlessly handing out sanitizing wipes. Elena moved down the aisle, stepping into the first-class cabin. The contrast between first class and the rest of the plane was usually stark, but here, even first class looked tired. The leather seats were scratched, the tray tables were uneven, and the overhead bins rattled ominously. Sitting in seat 2B was a man wearing a sharp gray suit, sipping a pre-departure mimosa and scrolling through the Wall Street Journal on his iPad. Elena recognized him instantly. It was Marcus Langford, the vice president of North American ground operations for the airline. He was the executive directly responsible for customer service, gate agents, and baggage handling. He was also the man Elena was planning to meet soon to discuss his department's abysmal performance metrics. Marcus had been a vocal opponent of the board's decision to hire an outsider to run the company. He had lobbied hard for the CEO job himself insisting that the airline's problems were just media exaggeration. As Elena walked down the aisle, her trench coat brushing against the armrests, Marcus looked up from his tablet. For a second, his eyes glazed over her. Then his brain registered the face. He had seen the confidential board emails. He had seen her photograph on the cover of Forbes the previous year. He knew exactly who was supposed to be taking over the company. Marcus's face went completely slack. The mimosa glass in his hand tilted, spilling a few drops of orange liquid onto his expensive slacks. He blinked, leaning forward, his mouth opening. Ms. Cole. Before the word could fully leave his mouth, Elena stopped. She didn't say a word. She simply locked eyes with the vice president of operations, raised a single manicured index finger, and pressed it firmly against her lips. Shh! Marcus froze. A drop of cold sweat materialized at his hairline. He looked at her plain clothes, her position in the boarding line, and the basic economy boarding pass clutched in her hand. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. The new CEO was flying undercover. Elena gave him a microscopic, chilling smile. She lowered her finger and continued walking past him, heading toward the coach cabin. Marcus whipped his head around, staring in horror as the most powerful woman in the company was herded past the curtain dividing the classes. He frantically grabbed his phone and opened a text thread with the chief operating officer. Marcus, are you at the Chicago office yet? Marcus, just pulling in. Press release goes out soon. Why? Marcus, Caldwell is on my flight. Arthur, flight 408 out of JFK? Impossible. She has a private charter booked by the board. Marcus, I'm looking at her back right now. She's flying coach. Arthur, she's flying coach on a delayed JFK flight. Call JFK operations right now. Find out how she was treated. Back in the economy cabin, Elena finally reached row 38. The back of the plane smelled distinctly of chemical toilet fluid and stale pretzels. Seat 38E was sandwiched between a teenager aggressively chewing gum and a large man who had already commandeered both armrests and was snoring loudly. Elena quietly slid into the middle seat. The cushion was virtually non-existent, the metal frame digging immediately into her tailbone. Excuse me, she said to the flight attendant, Lena Hart, who was rushing down the aisle doing a final bin check. Could I possibly get a glass of water? Lena didn't stop walking. Beverage service starts 30 minutes after takeoff, ma'am. FAA regulations. She slammed an overhead bin shut and marched away. Elena opened the manila folder she had retrieved from her duffel bag. Inside was the organizational chart for JFK Terminal 4, along with the performance reviews of the management team. She took out a sleek silver pen. Next to the name Todd Jenkins, Terminal Shift Manager, she drew a neat, slow line through the text. She turned the page to the gate agent's roster. She found the name Brittany Langford. Elena didn't just cross the name out. She circled it in thick black ink, adding a small asterisk. Up at the front of the plane, the boarding doors were closed. The intercom crackled to life, and the captain's voice filled the cabin. Folks, apologies for the delay. We've got a little bit of a wait on the taxiway, but we should have you in the air shortly. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Elena looked out the small, scratched window. She could see Brittany Langford standing at the terminal window, phone in hand, snapping a selfie with the airplane in the background. Enjoy the picture, darling, Elena thought, her southern accent echoing in her own mind. It's going to be your last. At cruising altitude, the reality of the airline was much worse than the spreadsheets had indicated. Elena Langford sat wedged in seat 38, physically uncomfortable, but mentally sharper than she had been in years. The air conditioning above her was broken, leaking a slow, rhythmic drip of condensation onto the shoulder of her trench coat. The teenager to her left was watching a painfully loud action movie on his phone without headphones. and the large man to her right was encroaching so far into her space that his elbow kept bruising her ribs. She did not complain. She simply observed. In her lap, shielded by the folder, she continued to write. Her silver pen glided over the paper, documenting a catastrophic failure of corporate standards. Cabin cleanliness, grade F. Tray table latches broken in rows 36 through 38. Flight attendant uniforms unkempt, lacking name tags. PA system distorted. Morale non-existent. Up in first class, Vice President of North American Ground Operations, Marcus Langford was experiencing a quiet, profound, nervous breakdown. He had abandoned his mimosa. His iPad was resting on his tray table, but his hands were shaking too violently to type. He was desperately trying to connect to the aircraft's Wi-Fi network, a service the airline proudly advertised, but notoriously underfunded. It took him 4 agonizing minutes and 3 failed credit card prompts to finally secure a connection that was slower than dial-up. Once online, he opened his corporate messaging app to find the chief operating officer. "Marcus, are you at the Chicago office yet?" "Marcus, just pulling in. Press release goes out soon. Why?" "Marcus, Caldwell is on my flight." "Arthur, flight 408 out of JFK?" "Impossible. She has a private charter booked by the board." "Marcus, I'm looking at her back right now. She's flying coach." "Arthur, she's flying coach on a delayed JFK flight. Call JFK operations right now. Find out how she was treated." "Marcus, I just got off the phone with the Terminal 4 shift manager, Todd Jenkins." "Marcus, what the hell is going on? Why is the new CEO flying in basic economy?" "Marcus, I don't know. She's doing an undercover boss routine without the cameras." "Marcus, what did Todd say? How was she treated at the gate?" There was a long, excruciating pause. The typing bubble on the messaging app appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. Finally, the response came through. "Arthur, Todd said she was flagged for a first-class operational upgrade. The gate agent, a 26-year-old named Brittany Langford, manually deleted the upgrade, forced her into a middle seat in the back row, and made her gate check her carry-on." Marcus stared at the screen, all the blood draining from his face. The ambient hum of the jet engine suddenly sounded like a death knell. "Marcus, she deleted the upgrade. Why?" "Arthur, Todd said Brittany claimed the passenger was being abusive and speaking with an incomprehensible accent, demanding special treatment." Marcus felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He unbuckled his seatbelt, ignoring the illuminated fastened seatbelt sign, and stumbled toward the curtain dividing first class from the main cabin. He peeled back the thick blue fabric by a fraction of an inch and peered down the long, narrow aisle. Way in the back, sitting in the darkest, most miserable section of the aircraft, he could just barely see the top of Elena Langford's neatly pinned hair. As he watched, a fresh disaster unfolded. The beverage service had finally reached the back of the plane. Lena Hart, the flight attendant who had welcomed Elena aboard with all the warmth of a prison warden, was aggressively pushing the heavy metal drink cart. In row 37, right in front of Elena, sat a young mother with a fussy, crying toddler on her lap. The mother looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. "I'm sorry," the young mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you have any small cartons of whole milk? He won't settle down." Lena sighed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Milk is $4, cashless only. We take Visa, MasterCard, or Amex." The mother fumbled with her diaper bag, pulling out a battered debit card. She handed it to Lena, who swiped it through the handheld terminal. The terminal beeped a sharp, angry red. "Declined," Lena said loudly, ensuring the surrounding rows could hear. "Got another card?" "Declined. That can't be right," the mother whispered, her face flushing crimson with embarrassment. "I think my bank put a travel lock on it. Can I just have the milk? I'll call them when we land and pay." "No pay, no milk," Lena snapped, reaching down to take the small carton off the mother's tray table. Airline policy. Marcus, watching from 70 feet away, silently screamed, "Give her the milk. Just give her the damn milk." Before Lena could snatch the carton, a hand reached forward from row 38. It was a remarkably steady hand with manicured nails, holding a sleek black American Express Centurion card. "Actually," Elena Langford said, her Louisiana drawl cutting through the cabin noise like a velvet-wrapped brick. "According to our protocol, Section 4, Paragraph B of the Family Travel Guidelines, infant hydration items, including milk and formula water, are to be provided strictly on a complimentary basis, regardless of seating class. You don't owe her $4, darling. The airline owes her an apology." Lena froze, staring at the woman in the trench coat. "Excuse me, who do you think you are quoting policies at me?" Elena didn't flinch. "I am a passenger who knows how to read, and since your point-of-sale terminal seems to be prioritizing profit over basic human decency, you can go ahead and open a tab on my card. I'll buy the milk. In fact, I'll buy a round of whatever they want for the next 3 rows." Lena snatched the black card, her face twisting in irritation. She swiped it. The machine chimed a pleasant green. She shoved the card back at Elena. "Whatever. Enjoy your flight." She pushed the cart forward, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The young mother turned around, tears in her eyes. Thank you so much, ma'am." "Don't you worry about it, sweetheart." Elena smiled warmly. "Some people just forget who they work for." At the front of the plane, Marcus let the curtain fall shut. He staggered back to his spacious first-class seat and collapsed. He realized with absolute certainty that he was watching the systematic execution of his own career. By the time the flight began its descent into Chicago, the atmosphere in the cabin was thick with the distinct smell of burnt coffee and collective misery. The sky outside the scratched windows was a bruising, stormy gray, perfectly matching the mood inside the aircraft. It was that morning. Elena Langford packed her silver pen and her meticulously detailed notes back into her manila folder. She zipped it securely into her bag. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, rattling violently, but Elena's posture remained perfectly rigid. She was no longer just a passenger in seat 38E. Her mind had already transitioned into the boardroom. At that morning, the press embargo lifted. Across the globe, the public relations machine of the airline sprang to life. Press releases hit the servers of Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and Reuters simultaneously. The headline was plastered across financial terminals in London, New York, and Tokyo. Airline board ousts leadership, appoints turnaround titan. Elena Langford as Chief Executive Officer. In first class, Marcus Langford refreshed his browser. The image that loaded made his stomach drop into his designer shoes. It was a high-resolution corporate portrait of Elena Langford. In the photo, she was wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair styled immaculately, her eyes staring directly into the camera with an expression of ruthless competence. Several rows behind him in the premium economy section, a businessman who had purchased the in-flight Wi-Fi gasped loudly. "Holy, look at this! The airline just fired their CEO." Whispers began to spread through the cabin like a brush fire. Phones pinged as those with connectivity received breaking news alerts. The flight attendants who had been hiding in the galley cementeros began to check their own company devices. Lena Hart, the flight attendant who had denied the mother the milk, pulled her company-issued phone from her apron. She read the internal memo that had just hit her inbox. Her eyes scanned down to the embedded photograph of the new CEO. Lena's breath hitched. She slowly, mechanically turned her head to look down the aisle, past the rows of exhausted passengers, straight to the back row. Seat 38E. The woman in the trench coat was looking right back at her. Elena didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply held Lena's terrified gaze for 3 excruciating seconds before turning to look out the window. Lena backed into the galley and clamped a hand over her mouth. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away at JFK Terminal 4, the breakfast rush was hitting its peak. Brittany Langford was standing at the counter of a busy airport Starbucks, waiting for her iced caramel macchiato. She was feeling incredibly proud of herself. She had successfully bullied a passenger, asserted her dominance, and even managed to get likes on her airport selfie. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Brad, the quiet coworker who had been beside her at Gate B24. "Brad, Brittany, are you seeing the news? Tell me you're seeing the news." Brittany rolled her eyes, typing back, "Brittany, no, I'm getting coffee." "What now? Did a baggage cart catch fire again?" Brad, image attachment. "Brad, look at the photo. Look at the new CEO." Brittany tapped the image to expand it. The Wall Street Journal article filled her screen. She stared at the headline. She stared at the name, Elena Langford. Then she stared at the face. The phone slipped from Brittany's manicured fingers. It hit the tiled floor of the Starbucks with a sharp crack, the screen splintering into a spider web of shattered glass. "Caramel macchiato for Brittany," the barista called out cheerfully. Brittany didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The accent, the leather bag, the platinum medallion status, the calm, unnerving way she had whispered, "You've been incredibly helpful, Brittany." She hadn't been talking to a nobody. She had just publicly humiliated, downgraded, and mocked the billionaire executive who now owned her entire professional existence. Back in Chicago, the wheels of the Boeing 737 slammed onto the runway with a harsh, jarring impact, a fitting end to a miserable flight. The thrust reversers roared, throwing passengers forward in their seats. As soon as the seatbelt sign chimed off, chaos erupted. Passengers stood up fighting for overhead bin space. In first class, Marcus Langford practically vaulted out of his seat. He stood at the front of the aircraft, adjusting his tie, trying to control his breathing. He had a desperate, foolish plan. He would intercept her as she exited the plane, offer a groveling apology for the crew's behavior, and insist that he had no idea she was treated so poorly at JFK. It took 15 minutes for the plane to empty. Elena waited patiently in the back, letting the teenager and the snoring man go ahead of her. Finally, she walked up the aisle, her trench coat draped elegantly over her shoulders, her stride purposeful and entirely commanding. She reached the front galley. Marcus stepped directly into her path, pasting a strained, desperate smile onto his face. "Ms. Langford," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "I cannot begin to express my shock. If I had known you were on this aircraft, if I had known what happened in New York, you would have done what, Mr. Langford?" Elena interrupted. Her voice was no longer the warm, polite tone she had used at the gate. It was the voice of a predator, cold, flat, and absolute. "I would have ensured you were treated with the utmost respect," Marcus pleaded, reaching out to take her bag. "Please let me assist you with your luggage. My town car is waiting on the tarmac." Elena did not hand him the bag. She stepped closer to him, forcing Marcus to instinctively step back. "The fact that you think respect is something reserved only for the CEO is exactly why this airline is failing, Marcus," Elena said quietly. "You saw me at the gate. You saw me walk down this aisle. You did nothing. You let a mother beg for milk while you drank champagne." Marcus swallowed hard. "Ms. Langford, please. Please." "I don't need your town car," Elena said, brushing past him onto the jet bridge. She paused and looked over her shoulder. "I want you in the executive boardroom in 1 hour. Have IT set up a live company-wide video broadcast to all hubs, starting with JFK. Do not be late." Without another word, the woman who had boarded as a nobody walked up the jet bridge, leaving the vice president of operations trembling in the doorway of the ruined airplane. The corporate headquarters of the airline was a towering glass monolith in the heart of downtown Chicago. To the outside world, It looked like a fortress of modern commerce. Inside, it was a mausoleum of failing strategies and terrified executives. When Elena Langford walked through the revolving glass doors that morning, the lobby fell into a breathless, paralytic silence. The receptionist, a young man who had been aggressively filing his nails just moments before, shot up from his ergonomic chair so fast he knocked over a cup of pens. Elena hadn't changed clothes. She still wore the dark tailored jeans, the beige turtleneck, and the olive green trench coat. The leather duffel bag was slung over her shoulder, but the aura she projected was entirely different from the quiet passenger in seat 38E. She moved with the lethal, unhurried grace of a great white shark gliding through a crowded reef. The chief operating officer, Arthur Penhaligon, was waiting for her by the private executive elevators. Arthur was a tall, thinning man in his late 50s who had survived 3 previous CEO transitions by knowing exactly when to stay quiet. He looked at Elena's casual attire and then at the terrifying stillness in her eyes. "Ms. Langford," Arthur said, extending a hand that trembled almost imperceptibly. "Welcome. The board is thrilled." "Save the pleasantries, Arthur," Elena interrupted, ignoring his outstretched hand entirely. Her Louisiana accent was no longer warm. It was sharp and brittle, like frosted glass. "Where's the broadcast studio?" "We've set it up into the main executive boardroom on the 42nd floor. The tech team has established a secure, mandatory viewing feed to every terminal, break room, corporate office, and maintenance hangar in the network. We have roughly 12,000 employees logging in live, and Marcus Langford, he is in the boardroom." Arthur swallowed hard, sweating through his suit, if I'm being honest. "Good," Elena said, as the elevator doors chimed open. "Let him sweat." 1,000 miles away, inside the employee break room of JFK's Terminal 4, the atmosphere was suffocating. The room was packed with gate agents, baggage handlers, and customer service representatives. A massive flat-screen television hung on the wall, currently displaying a static screen with the airline logo and a countdown timer. In the back corner, Brittany Langford sat huddled in a plastic chair, her arms wrapped tightly around her stomach. She looked physically ill. Her makeup, usually flawless, was slightly smudged from where she had nervously rubbed her eyes. Beside her stood Todd Jenkins, the shift manager. Todd was pacing back and forth, furiously chewing on a thumbnail. "Brittany, what exactly did you say to her?" Todd hissed, leaning down so the others wouldn't hear. "The terminal director just called me. He said corporate HR flagged my employee file 10 minutes ago." "What did you do?" "I didn't know," Brittany whispered frantically, tears pooling in her eyes. She looked like a nobody. She had this thick, stupid country accent and a cheap coat. She was trying to hustle a first-class upgrade. I just treated her like we treat everyone else." "You manually deleted a system upgrade for the CEO," Todd groaned, gripping his thinning hair. "You made her gate check her bag when it fit the sizer. I backed you up. I didn't even look at her reservation. I just backed you up. Brad tried to warn me." Brittany choked out, looking across the room at Brad, who was purposely standing as far away from her as physically possible. "Brad told me not to push it. Brad gets to keep his job," Todd spat. "We are going to get slaughtered at exactly that morning." The countdown on the screen hit 0. The logo vanished, replaced by a crystal-clear high-definition broadcast from the Chicago boardroom. The camera was positioned at the head of a massive mahogany table. Seated there, perfectly centered in the frame, was Elena Langford. She had removed the trench coat. The beige turtleneck looked striking against the dark wood of the room. She wasn't flanked by PR representatives or board members. She sat entirely alone at the head of the table. To her right, just visible at the edge of the frame, sat Marcus Langford. He looked like a man strapped to an electric chair, waiting for the switch to be flipped. "Good morning," Elena began. Her voice was calm, resonant, and broadcast with perfect audio clarity. The Southern cadence was undeniable, but the authority behind it commanded absolute, terrifying respect. My name is Elena Langford. As of this morning, I am your Chief Executive Officer. Across the country, 12,000 employees held their breath. I was hired by the board of directors because this airline is bleeding out, Elena continued, looking directly into the camera lens. Over recent years, our stock has lost nearly half its value. Our on-time performance ranks dead last among the legacy carriers. Our customer satisfaction scores are catastrophic. The financial analysts say our business model is fundamentally broken. They blame route networks, fuel hedging, and fleet age. She paused, steepling her fingers on the mahogany table. The analysts are wrong. Our business model isn't broken because of airplanes. It is broken because of our culture. We have cultivated an environment of hostility, arrogance, and profound disrespect. And this morning, I had the privilege of experiencing it firsthand. In the JFK break room, Brittany let out a tiny, involuntary whimper. I didn't fly here on a private jet, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate volume. I flew on Flight 408 out of JFK Terminal 4. I booked a standard economy ticket under my maiden name. I did not announce my arrival. I simply stood in line as a paying customer to see how the people who pay our salaries are treated. Elena leaned forward. What I found was a rot that extends from the lowest entry-level positions all the way up to the executive suite. She turned her head slowly, looking at the man seated to her right. The camera operator smoothly panned the shot to include a wider angle showing Marcus Langford. He was ashen, his eyes darting frantically. "Marcus," Elena said calmly. "Yes, Ms. Langford," Marcus croaked. His microphone barely picked up the sound. "You are the Vice President of North American Ground Operations. Customer service, gate protocols, and in-flight experience fall directly under your jurisdiction." "Yes, ma'am. You were a passenger on Flight 408 this morning, seated in first class," Elena stated. It wasn't a question. "While you were drinking a pre-departure mimosa, I was seated in row 38. A few rows ahead of me, a mother with a screaming toddler attempted to purchase a carton of milk. Her debit card was declined. The flight attendant, adhering strictly to a cashless policy, refused to provide the milk." Marcus swallowed. "Ms. Langford, the cashless policy is—" "The cashless policy," Elena cut him off, her voice cracking like a whip, "is superseded by Section 4, Paragraph B, of our Family Travel Guidelines, which dictates that infant hydration is to be provided on a complimentary basis, regardless of class. A policy, I might add, that you personally signed off on last October." Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You saw the interaction, Marcus," Elena continued mercilessly. "I watched you look through the curtain. You saw a mother humiliated. You saw a flight attendant violate safety and decency protocols over $4. And you closed the curtain and sat back down." I didn't want to interfere with the crew's operational duties," Marcus stammered, sweat visibly beading on his forehead. "There are union regulations regarding—" "Do not insult my intelligence by blaming the union," Elena snapped. "You didn't interfere because you didn't care. You have spent recent years in this boardroom telling the press that our customer service issues are exaggerated. You have blamed the passengers. You have fostered a culture where our frontline workers believe that cruelty is an acceptable substitute for efficiency because they see it modeled by their leadership." Elena turned back to face the main camera. "Leadership," she said softly, "sets the tone. And the tone of this airline is currently unacceptable. Therefore, the restructuring of this company begins at the top." She didn't look back at Marcus. She didn't need to. "Marcus Langford, your employment with this airline is terminated effective immediately. Security is waiting outside the boardroom to escort you from the building. You will not be allowed to return to your office." A collective gasp echoed through every break room in North America. Firing an executive was one thing. Executing them live on a mandatory company-wide broadcast was something straight out of a corporate gladiator arena. Marcus stood up. His legs were shaking so badly he had to brace his hands on the table. He looked around the room for any sympathetic eyes, but Arthur Penhaligon and the other executives were staring resolutely at their notepads, refusing to look at him. He was a ghost. Without a word, Marcus turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors. 2 large security guards stepped into the frame, took his security badge, and escorted him out. The heavy doors clicked shut. Elena watched the doors close. Then she turned her attention back to the camera. The silence on the broadcast was absolute. "Now," Elena said, her tone shifting from executive executioner to something much more terrifying, personal. "Let us talk about Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport." In the JFK break room, Todd Jenkins squeezed his eyes shut. Brittany Langford put her head between her knees, hyperventilating. "At that morning, I approached Gate B-24, Elena narrated, reading from a perfectly organized notepad she had pulled from her folder. "I politely informed the gate agent that my seat assignment had vanished from the app. I was informed by this agent that my reservation had not vanished, but that I simply, and I quote, didn't know how to refresh my app." Several employees in the JFK break room slowly turned their heads to stare at Brittany. "I presented my platinum medallion status," Elena continued. "A status that, according to our system architecture, had already flagged me for an operational upgrade to first class. The gate agent deliberately manually deleted that system upgrade out of spite. She then demanded I place a 21-inch carry-on into the sizer. When it fit perfectly, she falsely claimed it was too heavy, simply because another passenger had defended me." Elena paused, letting the sheer absurdity of the behavior sink in. "When I requested a manager, a shift manager arrived. He did not ask for my side of the story. He did not check the system. He blindly corroborated the gate agent's lie that I was being abusive and demanding special treatment." Elena looked directly into the lens, her dark eyes flashing with a righteous, furious fire. "But the most enlightening part of my morning was not the operational incompetence. It was the personal commentary." Elena picked up her notes and read verbatim. "Just because you come up here talking loud and using your whatever that accent is doesn't mean you get to hustle your way into a better seat. This is New York. We don't do that sweet tea and grits routine here." The JFK break room was dead silent. Even the ice machine seemed to have stopped buzzing. The sheer racism, the regional prejudice, the unvarnished arrogance of the statement hung in the air like toxic smoke. "I am a proud daughter of Baton Rouge, Louisiana," Elena said, her accent thickening intentionally, wrapping around every vowel with deliberate pride. "My accent is a reflection of my heritage. It is not an invitation for disrespect. More importantly, it is completely irrelevant to my right to be treated with basic human dignity. The assumption that someone with a southern drawl, or someone of color, or someone wearing a cheap coat is trying to hustle. The airline is not just a violation of our corporate code of conduct. It is a massive legal liability, and it is a moral failure." She set the notepad down. "To the shift manager on duty at Gate B-24 this morning, Todd Jenkins, you failed to de-escalate. You failed to investigate. You failed to manage. You are hereby demoted to a probationary ticketing agent, pending a full review by HR. If you survive the review, you will never hold a supervisory role at this airline again." Todd slumped against the wall, burying his face in his hands. It was a brutal demotion, stripping him of his salary and pension benefits. But it was better than being fired. He was lucky. Brittany was not. "And to the gate agent at B-24, Elena said. She didn't use her name. She didn't dignify Brittany with a name on the national broadcast. She just stared into the camera, and Brittany felt as though the CEO was looking right through the screen, directly into her soul. Your behavior was discriminatory, vindictive, and entirely unacceptable. You represent everything that is currently wrong with this airline. You don't view our passengers as people. You view them as props for your own amusement. You are terminated instantly. Elena didn't blink. In fact, I coordinated with JFK security 10 minutes before this broadcast began. Your security badge has already been electronically deactivated. You cannot access the terminal. You cannot access your employee portal, and your flight benefits have been permanently revoked. Airport police are standing by the break room door right now to escort you to the curb. At that exact moment, the door to the JFK break room swung open. 2 Port Authority police officers stepped inside, scanning the room. Every single employee in the room backed away from Brittany Langford, leaving her isolated in the corner. "Ma'am," the taller officer said, looking at Brittany, "we need you to gather your things. We're escorting you off airport property." Brittany couldn't speak. She grabbed her designer purse with shaking hands, her face streaked with mascara. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking loudly against the linoleum. As she reached the exit, she looked back at the flat-screen television. Elena Langford was still speaking. "As for flight attendant Lena," Elena said, glancing at another paper, "you will be pulled off the line immediately and sent to mandatory empathy and protocol retraining. Your decision to withhold milk from a child over $4 while flying on a multi-million-dollar aircraft was an embarrassment. If you fail the retraining, you will join your vice president, Negligent, and your gate agent in the unemployment line." Brittany was led out into the terminal. She walked past gate B24. Another agent was already logging into her computer terminal. Passengers were lining up. The world was moving on. She had thought she was the star of her own movie, untouchable behind her laminate counter. But she had picked a fight with a titan, and the titan had crushed her without even raising her voice. Back in Chicago, Elena leaned back in her chair. "Let me make myself incredibly clear to everyone watching," she said, her tone softening just a fraction, returning to the firm but professional demeanor she was famous for. "I do not expect perfection. The weather will cause delays. Airplanes will have mechanical issues. Luggage will occasionally get lost. We work in a chaotic, unpredictable industry." She looked around the empty boardroom, commanding the space with absolute certainty. "But I demand respect. We are in the business of human connection. We take people to their weddings, to their business pitches, to the bedsides of their dying relatives. If you cannot treat that responsibility with reverence, if you cannot look at a passenger in basic economy and treat them with the exact same dignity as a CEO in first class, then I suggest you hand in your badge right now." Elena Langford smiled for the first time since the broadcast began. It was a cold, bright, terrifying smile. "Because if you don't, I promise you, I will find you and I will fire you. The era of the entitled airline is over. Welcome to the new meridian. Now get back to work." The screen cut to black. Over the following months, the airline underwent the most aggressive corporate turnaround in aviation history. Elena Langford ruthlessly purged the middle management bloat, implemented strict new customer service guidelines, and completely overhauled the company's culture. Gate agents were empowered to grant upgrades to polite passengers. Flight attendants were given discretionary budgets to make passengers comfortable. The viral videos of screaming gate agents vanished, replaced by news articles detailing the airline's shocking rise to the #1 spot in customer satisfaction rankings. The stock price tripled. As for Brittany Langford, her travel influencer career never quite took off. Stripped of her flight benefits and unable to use the airline industry as her personal playground, she was forced to get a job working the returns counter at a big box retail store. Occasionally, when a customer would come up to her counter with a thick accent or a battered coat, she would feel a cold sweat break out on the back of her neck, terrified that the woman with the leather bag had found her again. Elena Langford never thought about Brittany again. She was too busy running the world. Can you imagine losing your career just because you decided to bully the wrong person? Elena Langford proved that true power doesn't need to yell to be heard. It just needs to act. Arrogance will always cost you, but kindness is free. If you loved this satisfying story of ultimate corporate revenge and watching a bully get exactly what she deserved, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good karma story, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life drama. What would you have done if you were the CEO? Let us know in the comments below.